If you want engagement, lead by listening. What's your period question mark ratio? As an executive coach, I was working with Phil, director of finance for his company. He shared frustrations he was having with one of his staff accountants, Melinda. She wasn't performing to his expectations, yet he struggled communicating with her. She gets defensive so easily, he said. I have trouble speaking with her about performance issues. I feel like we are pulling in opposite directions. I suggested that as clearly and specifically as he could, Phil should explain his performance expectations, including the reasons. I also encouraged him to frame his communications in a go-forward, future-looking, positive way. I suggested we do a role play. Pretending I was Melinda, I said, "You've come to my office, I invite you in, and you sit down. Now speak." Phil proceeded to lay out each of his expectations in great detail, providing reasons for each and identifying gaps in Melinda's performance with those expectations. Phil then articulated specific solutions by which Melinda could close these gaps. He finished and looked at me for approval. You did a very thorough job of explaining the current situation, I said. You explained what needed to change, why, and how. You were specific and detailed without being judgmental. You didn't dwell on the past, but focused on the future, including how Melinda could succeed. Your message was terrific, except for one thing. What's that? Phil asked. I showed Phil a picture of a large period and a question mark with a ratio sign between them. Do you know what this is? I asked. I'm not sure, Phil replied. It symbolizes the period question mark ratio. When you're conversing with your employees, for every one of your sentences that ends in a period, how many end with question marks? I never thought about it, Phil said. What would you estimate? I don't know. How about just now in the role play where I was Melinda? Beats me, Phil said. Probably more periods than question marks. You're a numbers guy, I said. What's the symbol for infinity? I counted over a dozen sentences without a single one ending in a question mark. That bad? He said. It's not that it's bad, it's just a missed opportunity. You did a terrific job of laying out the facts. Now, to really engage Melinda, you need to blend in questions. Invite her to be part of the process. I taught Phil the EAR method of listening, where E stands for explore, which means asking open-ended, exploratory questions. A is for acknowledge, by which the listener confirms his or her understanding with the speaker. And after the speaker confirms that the listener's understanding is correct, the listener responds, the R. After some practice, Phil built questions into his planned discussion with Melinda. What did she think? How did she see things? What did she see as a solution? How can I, Phil, help you succeed? The results? Very soon, a low-trust, low-engagement relationship turned into high-trust, high-engagement. And Phil became a devotee of leading through questions. Moral of the story. In An Employee Engagement Lesson Learned from a Volunteer Experience, 2 stories down, I identify 3 pillars of engaged workplace relationships. 1. Making a difference. 2. Sharing a purpose. And 3. Connecting personally. I can think of no better way to support all 3 than developing a habit of asking employees questions and listening to their answers. The period question mark ratio and EAR method form an excellent 1-2 combination. The first is for self-awareness. It's a check-in. I'll find myself speaking to someone when a little voice inside my head whispers, "What's your ratio, Jathan?" I'll make a quick count. If it's skewed towards periods, my wife would say a not unusual circumstance, I'll stop and ask a question instead of making another statement. The EAR supplies the methodology. Its 3 parts are normally done in sequence. 1. Start by exploring the other person's position. asking open-ended questions such as, what do you think? How do you see it? What are some examples? 2. Move to acknowledgement, confirming your understanding of what the person thinks is important. So if I understand you, is that accurate? So your main concern is that right? 3. After the person confirms that you understand what matters, respond. Why is the ear method effective? 1. It improves the quality of your response. Instead of shooting from the hip, following the ear sequence will give you the information and time to craft a nuanced, intelligent response. 2. At the psychological level, the E and the A combine to create a receptive environment for communication. Think about how you felt the last time someone heard your point of view and showed he or she paid attention and understood. You felt pretty good, didn't you? 3. The ear method eliminates perhaps the number one culprit in relationship breakdown, the erroneous assumption. Far too often, we jump to our response, basing it on what we assume about the other person. We shouldn't be surprised that our response elicits a negative reaction. Its inaccuracy offends the other person who feels misunderstood. The ear listening method is useful in essentially all exchanges. However, it's especially useful in building engaged relationships. You can use it to create a shared sense of purpose by asking employees what they think is most important. You can help them enjoy a greater sense of accomplishment by asking them what will make them more effective in their jobs. And simply by using this method, you will create a stronger personal connection with your employees. The ear method isn't a rigid mechanical tool. Rather, it's an approach to keep you other-focused versus self-focused and maximize the likelihood of your having positive, constructive relationships with your employees.